Well guys, in today's video I'm gonna be installing P2R's high compression cast replacement DNJ pistons. So these are your flat top pistons out of a J35 A4, and these I believe are similar to the J32 A2 pistons, but they are DNJ brand and they're stocked by P2R, and they have them on his website. So we're gonna go ahead and try these. These are much cheaper than the Tron forged pistons, but they're nowhere near as strong. So if you've been following along, you already know the reason why we're doing it. You can kind of see that one did it and that one did it. So I believe tuner error, but we're not going to talk about that in this video. That was discussed in prior video. Basically what I got to do is I got to take each one of these to the press the pins out, get the rods cleaned up. I got to check the bore, make sure all these fit in, and I have to check the ring gaps. The ring gap is going to take me the longest, but we're just going to do it a little bit at a time. And I'm not going to set my phone up and do the whole assembly just because it's so tedious of checking ring gaps. So I'm going to do one and show you what I do, and then repeat the process times 6. Okie doke, piston number 1 is finished. So what I did, I took this block of wood here, and that way I get kind of a level surface, and we just used the Harbor Freight press, and we went ahead and pressed the pin out. Now in order to do so, you had to take these little C-clips out, so I just took it out of one side and I pressed it out of the other side. What you gotta do, you gotta find the gap. See the little gap right there? See if we can, you can kind of see it. So there's a space in the C-clip. So you gotta move that space until it's close to this opening, and then use a pick or a little flat screwdriver like that one, and then pry up on it and then pop it out. But hold your hand over it so it doesn't go flying, because they like to go pew. Make sure, yep, okay. I wanna make sure I'm doing it right. And then it just presses right on out. Go ahead and release, come back up some. So you can either use a socket or whatever you want. Now I don't recommend putting it back in like this, but only getting it out because these are not, you know, the pins aren't going to go back in. Kind of looked at the taper of this. You don't want to like push on it and have any resistance or anything like that. This is coming out really freely, and it's just controlled, and you're not trying to smack it with a hammer. Now another way of doing this is you can take your pistons when they're brand new and you can put them in the oven. Put them in there like 250, 300 degrees, something like that. So because they're hot, they're going to expand, and the hole in the wrist pin hole is going to get larger. And then you can take your wrist pins and you can put those in the freezer. So you would already have one C-clip in one side, to where when you're done, you take one piston out and one pin out and you drop it in. It literally just boop, drops right in, and then you let it cool, and then you put the other C-clip in. Well, there you have all the old ones. They're all out. And we have all of our rods. Got to keep everything right. Start with the rings. So I'm going to clean each one of these cylinder walls up very, very well. Since I've honed the hell out of these, I hit these a little bit, but I've really hit these more. So I'm gonna brake clean the shit out of them, scrub them with the blue paper towels until I don't get any more residual stuff, and then we'll start the process of doing the filing the ring gap. So when you're talking about cylinder walls and cleanliness, there's no such thing as being too clean. You absolutely cannot take this out and have any black on it. So we're gonna go in here. We're just gonna sit here and scrub it up and down, all the way to the bottom, all the way around, all the way back. This is just your initial cleaning, so you can check your bore, your gap on your rings. Go like this, clean it real well. And if you pull it out and you have any black on it, I got a little bit right there on the tip, but I think that was from when I actually went down to the bottom. That's pretty good. So we're going to do the same on this. If we get any black, any discoloring on the shop towel at all, then you get a new shop towel, you spray the cylinders down with brake clean again, and continue on. Because any contaminants that are trapped inside those hash marks will act as sandpaper to your rings, and your engine will not last long at all. Ideally, engine builders have this giant tank where you just dip your whole engine block in it, and it gives it an ultrasonic bath and really hot cleaning solution. I have that option to take it to them. See that little bit of darkness? But I don't want to kind of put them out like that. But I do have that option. But I'm going to continue cleaning, and then we'll start the ring gap process. So I went ahead and opened up my first batch of rings. And I'm going to use this old J32 piston and rod here to make sure everything is pushed down and level in the bore. So if you come over here, we got the first ring inside the bore. The camera will focus. You can see the tiny little ring gap right there. See that? That's the ring gap. So what I have to do now is use my feeler gauge, and I'm going to see what the initial gap is, which it should be somewhere around 14 thou. So let's go to 14 thou here. And what we do, we want it to go in there and not drag, not pinch, not anything like that. Doesn't look like much of a gap just because the oil is kind of there. Wow, there is no gap at all. That is crazy. No gap. So, there's slightly a gap, but it's definitely not 14 thou. This is going to be a whole lot of work. So, let's go ahead and bump it down to say... Alright, so I got the ring in there, and this right here is a 10 thou. And if we come up here to the top where the ring gap is, you can kind of see it in the video. We're going to take this and slide it right in, if I can find it. There we go. See, that goes right in that space. So that ring gap right there is 10 thousandths. It's slightly dragging, but just slightly. So I can swoosh it through. So yeah, that's 10 thou. So that's way too tight. So I'm gonna go ahead and open that up and continue the process with the rest of them. So we're on like take 2 of this because I was talking and I never press record. So here's the here's the ring grinder. You're basically gonna put it in like so. Only grind one side. Keep the ring extremely flush and keep it pulled back to the keepers. We're gonna keep our hands on it like so. And we're gonna rotate it in a counterclockwise rotation. The reason why we do that is because as we take material off the ring, it's gonna create a burr, a tiny little sharp edge on that side of the ring. So if you went forward, then that burr would in turn be on the outside of the ring. And we don't want that because that's where all the cylinder wall is gonna be. So when we do counterclockwise, it'll create a burr on the inside of the ring, and then all you do, you take a little piece of emery cloth, 800 grit sandpaper, or a tiny little, very fine stone, and you deburr that edge, and then you go check the ring gap again. Now this is going to take me a couple hours to do all these, but this is a very, very important process of assembling an engine, and I want to make sure that we get it right. So bear with me, but I'm not going to show you the whole process, but I'll show you the finished result. Okay, it's been a little over an hour and I have got 6 rings done. That's it. I was taking my time and I still got a little too happy on 2 of them. So I got to 29 thou and 27 thou on the second ring. I took my time on the top rings and I got them all pretty close. But what I learned is the top ring's a whole lot harder than the second ring. So even though this takes like 35 rotations, I went over here and did like 15 and I got that number just in fast. So I'm like, oh Lord. So then I started to slow down, but it's really on how hard you push the ring into it, and it's just a whole lot. So it makes a lot of sense to go slower, but these I think what, cylinder 1 and 2 were my hot cylinders, so it's okay to have them a little bit bigger. But the top ring takes all the abuse anyway, so if I get any air trapped in it or any compression trapped in it, fuel, whatever, it's a large enough gap to where it can escape out the bottom, hopefully. So I'm gonna quit for now because it is dark outside. So it's time for me to go home, and I'll get back after it tomorrow. All right, day 2. We are back here again, and I've gotten all these done. Just finished the last one. It is imperative that if you do this, you do it very slow. Had this old school ring grinder, and I ended up using this side of it, and I'll show you the last one. There's multiple videos on how to operate a ring grinder, so I'm not even going to go into that. But basically, you can see that gap right there, and it may seem like a lot, but believe it or not, that's only 25 thou. So this is your second ring. So I believe stock J series, they want like 20 thou on the second. So I opened it up, and I'll show you what I opened most of them up to. So it's also imperative that you take notes. So I got my top cylinders right here, 19, 20, 19, 18, 18, 17, and then my second. That was my first go on the second, and it's a little bit fat. And the only reason being is because the top set of rings are hardened steel, and the bottom set are not. So the top ring took me, like, I counted something like 45 rotations, and then the second ring, it would only be like 17 rotations. So the material comes off of the second ring a whole lot faster than it does the top ring. So take that in mind and keep that, in a precaution. As far as the oil rings, I'm going to check them all, but they don't really require much gapping at all. You're not supposed to re-gap these. They're supposed to come pretty much preset, and they're supposed to be like a 2/1000th of a gap or something like that. Real fine. They don't see nowhere near the amount of heat, and they want to be able to, to wipe down the cylinder walls and keep everything lubricated. So they have their job, but I'll check them, but they shouldn't need any adjusting. Now, as far as these being DNJ rings and DNJ pistons, you have got to 100% gap these. You cannot skip that process, because the top ring and the second ring, I'm going to say most of the top rings had about a 5/1000th gap in them, and most of the second rings had about an 8/1000th gap in them. So you have got to open those up, and it's imperative. So I'm going to go ahead now, since I've already cleaned these 3, I'm going to start cleaning these back 3 really well, and I'll start the process of installing the rods. And another thing I wanted to note, when you take an engine apart or you put it together, you can use plastic gauge and check your bearing clearances. Now, because the motor only had like 90 minutes of runtime on it, my bearings are fine. But here's the thing I noticed. Honda likes to label their bearings color coded. So that one's green, 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 green. That one's green, but that one's brown. So I assume that this one has a slightly larger tolerance than these. And the only the reason I can kind of understand that would be like it's furthest away from the oil pump, so they want slightly more of a tolerance, because, I don't know, it's further away from the pressure. Kind of makes sense in my mind. But I'm going to assume that most of these have like 1.5 to 2/1000 clearance, and then this one might have 2.5 to 3/1000 clearance, something like that. But I know they're going to be tight, but I'm not even going to check them because the bearings look fine. I just got to make sure I clean all the rod journals really well from all the trash. So I'm going to get to cleaning and get to putting these things in. I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. Okay, so the block is all clean. All the bores are scrubbed down with brake cleaner, and taking a paper towel to them all. I've scrubbed the absolute hell out of them, making sure I had no sediment, no anything whatsoever. I didn't quit until I got clean paper towels, clean rags from scrubbing them with wet, stuff, and then pulling them out, and then they were still clean. So that's when I quit. Now I went ahead, and these were a lot easier. putting on than they were coming off. So you can tell I got my assembly grease down in there. These actually are floating, so they're not really like pressed in, and they're beautiful, absolutely beautiful fitment. And you can tell I went ahead and put my rings on the #1 cylinder here. So I got these. The one thing I don't have at the moment, I don't have a set of snap ring pliers with me, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and go get some snap ring pliers, and then when I come back, I'll be able to put all these clips in, because the DNJs, they require snap rings like this, and then the ones they came out of factory, they look like these. So you can't use these because they don't have a little inlet lip like these. So if you look at these, there's a tiny little pocket right there. So you can't use the original Honda ones. So we're gonna pause and I'll get some snap ring pliers and then we'll continue. Ended up getting this book here off of eBay. You can tell how thick it is. I mean, it's massive. I bought it for $4.95. And it covers all these cars, but it covers the Acura CL 3.2, and that would be in section 5 is what it says right there. So this will give me all my torque specs and any other questions that I have answered, and I also have another book coming that's all about the electrical wiring harness. So I'm going to go ahead now and start the process of installing these into the cylinders. Quick side note, when you're installing these C-clips, you gotta make sure that they're locked in, because it may look like it is, but mine just was and then it wasn't. So what I did, I put the pin in and without the piston, or without the rod, and then I locked one into one side, and then I rotated it over. That way I had the pin as my guide to push against it. So that's a real key component to make sure that it's locked into the groove on the piston.
You take a paper and start making me. Every step is major. Try to be focusing, and of course it hurts every thought you make, but I know for what it's for my own sake. I'm a paper plane.
So as you can see, we got all of the C-clips put in. They're all locked in. I went ahead and double checked them just to make sure. We got our assembly lube put on the pins, and I'm pretty happy with the way it is. So I'm gonna go ahead now and I'm gonna start with hole #1. Take the rod bolts off and make sure the bearings are clean on the inside and out. Make sure they're lined up and slide them in the bore. All right, well, I got the first one put in. Arrows facing the front. Get them out a little bit. I'll come back here. I'm gonna spin the crank. Comes all the way out. Actually, if you can tell, I'm not sure if it's in the way. It does stick above the deck slightly where that dome is. Pretty cool. 5 more to go. So I've got the first 3 in hole. Everything went in smooth as butter. I'm excited.
This is what you've done to me. to fly, but forgot that I should land. I'm a paper.
Well, the short block is fully assembled. Now I'm just waiting on getting my heads from the machine shop. Make sure those are all good and ready to go. I got all my arrows facing the right direction. Got each one of them numbered. Everything went back the way it was. I went ahead and just used the regular bearings that was already in it. They all looked fine. You know, it only had 90 minutes on it. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching me assemble it. Put it together, a little step-by-step action. But definitely 100% you had to grind the rings, which was the first time I've ever had to do that. So had a little bit of learning experience there. But that's going to be about it for this video, guys. Appreciate y'all watching it. I'm going to go ahead now and start throwing together the bottom end on it and get the oil pan all done and do as much as I can until I'm waiting for my heads. And then I'm going to start doing minor stuff on the car. So stay tuned for more. Thank y'all. Give it a video a thumbs up if you want to see more of them. See y'all later.